This is Family Like a Ghost, and we are live on our Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, and Twitter channels with I Love Kim Possible a Lot, or more commonly known as KP. So, welcome to the. How are you doing tonight?
I'm good. Well, I'm kind of tired. I got out of school pretty late today. I just got back a half an hour before the show started. So animating it's hard, but you got to do it.
Yeah. Well, I'm a musician, so I get stuck in the studio. Can we get lost in the mix? We get lost in a loop, and it's like, hey, I got that groove, and I'm going to play it for the next 2 hours, and I forget that I had other things I was supposed to do. One of the things we want to mention is we have a coupon code for Newsly, and Newsly is an iOS app. So if you use coupon code GHOST2021, you get 1 month free premium subscription, so you can stop scrolling and start listening. So what they do is they convert video podcast to audio, and this podcast is going to be on Newsly after we finish tonight, and so you can listen to it there, so you can stop scrolling and start listening. Use coupon code GHOST2021, get 1 month free premium subscription. So one of the things I always ask any person I have come on the show is like, when did you first get into YouTube or getting to social media? How did you get involved? What was your first recollection?
When did I do the thing that I do?
Yeah.
I started in college. I guess I'm technically in college now, but I'm just doing extra college essentially. But yeah, I started when I was 19 or so. I'm not going to tell you my age now because I hate it. But a little bit ago, and I was in an area that I was really isolated in, and I started with the My Little Pony fandom. So Brony is all that stuff. If you don't know what that is, you can Google it. Yeah, and I was ironically one of like 5 girls or something like that, making content, critiquing it. There's different like pools of content. So they have musicians, and they have like artists and voice actors that replicate the characters from the show and all that. But yeah, so that's when I got started, and then it took a little bit to take off, but after I hit like 30K or something, then things started to go a little bit faster. But yeah.
So one of the things I wanted to ask you is like, so you got into this fandom, so you maybe can talk about how people can benefit from participating in fandom culture, and how you actually maybe decided that's the direction you wanted to go in social media.
Yeah. Well, I've always been like into fandoms. I don't know if you can see you can see my background. I got stuff. It wasn't really hard for me to make that decision. It's just sometimes there's a stigma around making fan content, which I think is dumb. If you like doing, if X character motivates you to write music or do art or something like that you wouldn't normally do, I think it's just another creative inspiration. And then if someone really argues with you, then you can argue that like all the Renaissance artists did fan art for the Bible. So, it's not any lesser of an art because it's fan art. The crutch that people sometimes can fall into is if they want to go from fan art to professional artists, they kind of get too comfortable with their own style. And in the industry, you need to be able to adapt to other people's style. But if you're just doing like commissions and you're just like self-sustaining that way, you can do whatever your clientele wants. But yeah, so I've always, like I've had the channel like since I was like 14 or something with that name. And, when I started making content, I just wanted to keep it. And, even after the pony show ended, like 2 or 3 years ago in 2019. So I just been making like mostly Disney-ish content, Disney, Avatar, like just general Western animation stuff. So yeah, that's.
I think it's like the same if you think about music. Like if you're a blues musician, right? You're coming from Delta blues, and you're kind of just replicating that in your own motif. You figure out. So everybody starts in every genre, from blues to rock. And as a musician, we have to go on what was built before.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't have an issue with people doing what you're doing, because I think it's like in music, everybody, we kind of build off of our heroes. We build off of the
Mm-hmm.
people that we're inspired by, and a lot of our technique is because I like Hendrix, or I like James Brown, or I like whatever, and that ends up being in my music, and I subconsciously bring it in, and you're more maybe conscious of it, and you're pointing it out, and that's not an issue as an artist. I just every artist actually has to admit they have that level of influence.
I mean, like, yeah, at the end of the day, too, like, you need, I mean, ideally, you like the thing that you want to produce. So even if it's subconscious or not, you're still kind of having those influences in the back of your head. And even when I do original stuff, like, which I don't really share a lot online, I, I still like my general artistic style of my own is like not pretty close, but pretty heavily inspired by the Steven Silver Compossible style, because that's just kind of my niche. But yeah, like, you need to be like passionate about the thing that you like, and usually that's kind of what pushes you over the edge. And I think some people, now that we have the internet and conventions and things, can kind of unabashedly like hone into on that stuff and just like channel it creatively. And I think it's great. I think it's a great outlet for people who just want to be influenced by art and cartoons or music or whatever it is.
Well, I was a big comic book fan. I still am, and I was like very inspired by like the late 1960s, 1970s Jack Kirby, Ditko, Romita Jr. style, and Marvel had like a certain style. It was like a lot of Kirby, and so there were guys who would kind of clone Kirby, and it was hard to clone Ditko because he has a certain very, very unique style to Spider-Man, the early Spider-Mans. But now today, like Marvel seems to have like a corporate style. That like everything is like all one style. They don't have, because they used to have like, oh, you have Kirby, you have Ditko, you have Steranko, you have different people within the Marvel universe, and they had different styles. But now it seems more uniform.
Yeah, that's just about establishing brand stuff, which I think is dumb anyway, because people Marvel's like one of the most successful things ever now. But I think it's just like
Yeah,
how
I
they
kind of
want
like
to
the old days of
streamline it. Yeah.
when you actually had like Doctor Strange didn't look like the Hulk. It didn't look like Captain America because Ditko had a different aesthetic. It was kind of like bringing horror into comics. He had people that looked strange. Like the original Spider-Man wasn't a pretty character. He was kind of like an oddball character. It wasn't meant to look like. It wasn't meant to look like Superman or Batman or Bruce Wayne. He was supposed to be kind of an awkward kid. And then suddenly John Romita Jr. kind of made him buff. And I'm like, well, that's not the way he did it. But yeah, so I kind of get into that. So I totally being a nerdy comic head, I really I used to go to comic conventions, and everybody's dressed up like the Hulk or something. So I get it. Back in the 70s, I'm a child of the 70s. So I used
Okay, well, yeah, if you're interested in going to conventions, the market's expanded a lot since the late 2000s, and I haven't done a lot like in the very short term, but I usually get booked for conventions like once every couple of months, and I did, I think, 2 in August. So I'm very familiar with the convention scene if you have any convention questions.
Yeah. So do you set up like a table, and do you do the commissions? Do you do on-demand work at the convention?
Yeah, that's my biggest thing that I do, because what I find at the conventions is people want some kind of memory or some kind of personalization from the convention. And the majority of the people honestly aren't familiar with me, which is fine. So, I have like my pony branded stuff like that I've just had for a while that like slowly moves and very slowly moves. But a lot of people aren't into that. And a lot of people are like they don't even understand the brony thing, and I have to like awkwardly explain it. So I get a lot of children who want to like be characterized as a pony, or
So you can do it right in front of them, or actually
yeah. So
sign it.
like whatever they want. A lot of ponies, a lot of superheroes, or a lot of sometimes a lot of just traditional caricatures, which is fine.
Mm-hmm.
So it's always nice to see like that interaction of someone really wanting like, to be a pony, or like they, I had a case one time where, a guy was getting something for his partner who, she was sick at home, and he's like, he really likes Harley Quinn. She really likes Harley Quinn. She really
Mm-hmm.
likes the Bruce Timm style. And I'm like, I
Yeah,
can
that's
do
pretty cool.
that.
Oh,
So,
that's awesome.
so I
I
drew
like that.
her. Yeah, so I drew her in the Bruce Timm style. I just need a photo. So what I usually do is like I take a picture of their phone picture for reference, so that way they don't have to like, traditionally stand there, because that's how it worked back like 5,000 years ago. But we
Mm-hmm.
have technology now.
Yeah, yeah,
So, things like that, of just usually someone either liking a specific character or liking a specific style, or someone getting a gift to someone else. So usually it's a parent getting a gift from a child, and like, once they hear like you can be a pony, then a lot of times kids get excited, but it's really
yeah.
rewarding.
I think
Some
it's what it
sometimes
seems
it's,
like.
oh, go ahead,
Yes.
sorry.
Well, what I'm thinking is as a musician, I like to do jazz, right? And I like to
Hmm.
do free form, kind of just riffing, or what you call stream of consciousness, basically, kind of just going out there and just kind of doing it, with a bunch of
Hmm.
people. And it seems like that's kind of like a kind of art. Like
Hmm.
you kind of you at that table and people give you ideas, and I always like the kind of dynamicism of maybe I got an idea and I'm with a bunch of jazz guys and we don't know exactly what we're going to do, but we're
Hmm.
all kind of riff together, and I find it very fun. And as a musician, rather than just playing a cover song, like, oh, I'm going to play Stairway to Heaven all night. And like, no,
Hmm.
I'm not really into that. I'd rather do something new.
Yeah, I think in our shared experience, it's always fun surprising like the clientele, if that's what you want to call it, with something that they're familiar with, or something they weren't even expecting. Like me
Yeah.
putting like, little dialogue bubbles of, say a couple wanted a commission just based on me interpreting their dynamic just from at the table, and then like them coming back and like laughing at my stupid joke is always like great. But it's
Yeah.
my standard pitch is, do you want to buy some crap? I don't know if I can curse, so I say crap. But it sometimes it scares people, and it's like she's rude. But other times people like are really into it, and they're like,
Yeah. Well, I
wow,
think,
you're direct. And I'm like,
well, if you like Frank Zappa, you like the Mothers of Revenge, if you're coming from that kind of point of view, it's like, that's not a problem. Like,
yeah.
like I like Funkadelics, and they had all kinds of kind of language in their work. And it's like either like, oh, it's funny, or it's not, oh, I'm offended. Um, but yeah, I like people who are real. To me, it's like are you walking on eggshells about what you're gonna say, or are you gonna be kind of like, I'm comfortable? And I
Mhm.
think people either like it or they don't. It's like they don't. It's like with your music. Like if you do something experimental and you're kind of out there and you're doing content, it's like, yeah, not everybody's gonna like it. It's like if you're like an indie artist, sometimes you're gonna have a niche and you're not gonna be like everybody's cup of tea, which is
Yeah,
like, that's fine. Because
for
you're
sure. Something I've learned when I'm doing the live shows, when I'm at site or on site versus just like doing content in my room, or whatever, or recording in my room, is like reading the crowd. So sometimes people are like, again, really like off put, or like she's really rude, or like I didn't want to buy things. So definitely learned that lesson from this last couple of conventions, because I went to a really small town one and people were like, what? But yeah,
oh
like I think that was a big thing, like in my content, and we're getting back to it, of me just kind of cursing, and people were like, oh well, it's funny because the pony is cursing.
yeah.
So
Yeah, certain communities, like if you're in a big metropolitan area like New York or Boston or San Francisco, probably people aren't gonna have a problem with that. You get to like a small town that's not used to that,
mhm.
might have a different dynamic.
Yeah, for
um,
sure, for sure.
yeah, compared to like, if you're in the music and you're like, okay, you hit this little haven, and you were in New York City or in Los Angeles and you were doing gangster rap, it's like you show up at this other places, like they don't like that.
Mhm.
They're not gonna like that. So it's like you
For
better
sure, for sure.
read the crowd. Um, But one of the things that I was interested in looking at in terms of, do you have like tips as an artist on how you can improve your art over the years?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, like I said, I'm currently back in art school just to learn like programming stuff, like animation programs, because I have a hard time doing that on my own. But like I also draw, like that happens to come with drawing a lot of naked people, which is fine. I've done that a lot before anyway. But you don't have to draw naked people, but I would definitely recommend people.
Part of training, right? As an
artist.
Yeah,
it's about studying the natural proportion and just kind of doing it over and over again until it's like a sixth sense as far as like that, like proportions and how the body works. There's plenty of YouTube playlists. I think there's one called the Master Academy where people are like they're in their underwear or in a bathing suit or something. If you're really uncomfortable with the nudity.
Oh, so you can find models that you can actually go use that through the YouTube. You can
yes. So you don't have to physically be there, because I know that varies like depending on people's location if they have access to live model drawing sessions. But yeah, there's tons of resources on YouTube, or you can just Google like gesture drawing, but you know, getting comfortable with that, because it goes back to what I said earlier about people, you know, getting stuck in their own style. And then if they want to transition to more professional stuff or do something that's kind of out of their comfort zone, they don't know how to approach it. So that's that is a big one.
Well, I think like my daughter is a graphic artist. She's a sequential graphic artist.
Okay.
And she actually went to an art school when she was really young, got a scholarship, and she actually was super young, and we had to give her permission to actually go to the nude model. She was like 12, and people were like,
12.
Oh, yeah. But she was so good that the teacher said she needed to get to that because she was being trained, and we didn't have a problem with it because it's like we didn't look at it as, oh, that's a sex thing. No, it's art. It's like she was looking at it because they try to figure out the form of the hands and the body and get it real, and she was at such a level that we didn't, like, you know, people were getting all confused because they want to like layer like morality or other things on it, and we're just looking at pure art, you know, like as training. And so it's like, have you ever traveled out, you know, places to get like certain like motifs? Like we actually lived in Tokyo for 2 years, from 2004.
Oh wow, that's cool.
And my daughter got like a Shinto style to her work because she was very young. She went to a Japanese school called Nishimachi, and we were in Tokyo for 2 years, and she got exposed to the manga and the anime and Shinto, and actually learned how to do the katakana and hiragana in actual Japanese characters. And so all of her work has that infused in it because she was very young and it got embedded in her like early elementary school. From Japanese point of view instead of an American point of view. So I was wondering, have you ever traveled to other countries to get like certain aesthetics, like Italy or France or things like that?
Going to Europe is definitely on my bucket list. I haven't been to Europe yet. The most I've gone is out of the go to the Bahamas. Like I really like, I really like to go to Paris, for instance. Like you know, like Hunchback of Notre Dame is one of my real big artistic influences. So just being around Notre Dame and just sketching forever. But just on the day to day, it's mostly how I'm feeling internally and if I'm like personally motivated. So, you know, it's not so much like what's around me outside, but just more like if I'm feeling it or not. So
yeah. Because a lot of songwriters, there's a lot of what we do. I mean, we can get it from outside experiences, but because of COVID, most singer-songwriters have gotten inward, and it's a lot of what's in your psyche, what's in your head, what's in your soul, what's in your heart. Like that tends to drive songwriters anyway, because we tend to spend a lot of time like by ourselves or in like very controlled environments writing these songs from our own interpretations of what we're feeling. And most of it is internal. You know, you have some people deal with external, but a lot of what we do is kind of like our internal vision influenced by other things. But I can get like from an artistic point, you don't actually have to travel to get inspired. You can have it come from within.
Yeah, and I think too, like just being around like positive people is a big one, or just other people that like to do what you do. But, animation specifically, it's pretty isolating because it's long hours of just staring at a screen or staring at whatever template you're using if you're doing like traditional paper. But so you kind of get used to the vibe of just listening to podcasts. And Richard Williams says you're not supposed to listen to things while you're animating, but most people do anyway. But that's your animation history for today. But it's I'm having a hard time with it because I'm just working constantly and I don't have a lot of time for external things. But I know at the end of the day it's serving a bigger goal, so I'm trying to focus on
You're
that.
trying to branch into more from 2D type of work or line work into actual more multi-dimensional.
Yeah, I'm trying to get check all my boxes as far as like getting like the best portfolio I can. And I had to move back. I'm not with my parents, but close to my parents due to COVID. I was in LA for about 2 years, and I was just doing that, and that probably would have been the better option anyway, because there's a lot of better resources in LA that are more or less expensive if you can afford to live there. So it kind of balances it out. But just vibing a little bit now and trying to get through so I can get a job and go back.
Yeah, because that's really like in the music industry, it's like New York and Los Angeles. That's like the two, like you go for different reasons, like different vibes, but it's still like those art communities is more opportunity. Yeah, if you're like if you're a session player or producer, you're gonna get more work if you're in the hardware that industry is. You're gonna find more opportunities.
Yeah, and just for the short term for me, like it's at the end of the day, it's just about kind of being with my people and just being in a saturated by people that are like you, and like having access to Disneyland and just like having access to people that really get what's going on in the industry. And that's really hard to find. Those pockets are really hard to find if you're not in LA, or like New York has a big art scene, but like its animation scene is kind of from what my understanding. So so it's kind of like COVID's been nice as far as diversifying and making animating from home or working from home more viable for people that aren't in there. But I think like emotionally and mentally, like I just do better when I'm out there and have access to better friends.
I remember watching like some documentary about like Fleischer Studios and like Popeyes. And like the way it was kind of built like a factory. And like Jack Kirby, one of my favorite artists as a kid, when he was like in his teens, he actually was in one of those studios working on Popeye before he got to DC and Marvel. And he had said it was like, well, it's really factory like. It was like they were
like historically, the men would be the traditional animators, and then the women would paint the cells of the animation, and like take pictures of like the cells with the backgrounds and stuff like that, because women weren't talented enough to be doing the the rough animation, the big heavy stuff. So it's interesting to see how that's changing, because the industry is now slowly being more women driven and dominated. So
that's cool. Well, it's a good in any industry when we have people who've been kind of left out, and then you kind of break through. It's really important to be able to have your voice. That's one of the things I do on my podcast is like try to talk to emerging independent singer songwriters, and like 70 to 80% of the people I talk to are female singer songwriters, because I find that they're doing very interesting work. And it's probably the same thing in your field, where people who are trying to break through and do something that's more innovative are sometimes the people who were left out, of the old school way. And so if you come in from that out of the normal source of people that come in, then you have different ideas finally being. And I think any industry is going to do a lot better if you got people who are more saying, well, why can't I do that? Here's the rule. And I've always heard that at Berkeley, they tell like musicians like, okay, here's all the rules. And then we get out, break them all, because the only way you're going to do anything that anybody really wants to listen to is if you try to break out of the mold.
Yep, for sure. But
So in terms of how YouTube works, because you've been very good at, getting
Not
engagement.
lately, but in
Well,
general, I
previously,
try.
that's like your history based on what I read. You had really
Yeah.
good engagement. And was that like just did you plan that, or did it just happen, or you kind of rode the wave? Can you kind of tell
A
people?
little bit of all of that. Like once I was starting to gain traction, I like just did the best that I could strategically to try to ride things and try to like grow and treat it like a business, even though it's not a business. I've always been nonprofit. That will probably change soon-ish,
Mhm.
but for now, it's always I always just been doing it because I like doing it. So like one of the things I did from the get-go was develop a production team to help me make content and to make content faster. And that's how I've always been doing it. And it's also better because it's like I don't have to be alone, making content while I'm also alone animating. But especially like I got PTSD in 2016, so it's been helpful in that way of like, oh, I don't have to do everything. Like I can just
Mhm.
do X, Y, and other people can help me, so I can take time if I need it to like de-stress or deal with my
Yeah.
BS, which happens more than I would like. But yeah, and then
Cool.
after the pony show ended, so like the 2016, like what caused it was this big like fake controversy thing that I've covered on my channel already, and that kind of like drew it down. I had no idea how to handle it. On hindsight, I'd like address it and debunk it like straight out because people love that kind of stuff. But after like it kind of started going down, and then now we're at a stage where the pony show is over and they have a new generation, and a lot of the old guard are either really sticking hardcore to the ponies even though their views are going down, or people like me who are kind of just like doing everything, throwing tomatoes at the wall and seeing what sticks. And I've had kind of trouble getting stuff to stick. So artistically, it can be really draining to spend like 20 minutes to make a 20-minute video, and then it do like such a small percentage compared to like historically how the pony videos used to do.
Mhm.
I try not to internalize and to think about it too much, but like um it can be hard, and especially like when I'm at conventions, a lot of people who do recognize me are like, oh, I used to watch you all the time when you made My Little Pony stuff. And then I awkwardly say, oh, watch me again, I'm still making content. And that's a good like 60 to 70% of my interaction. So I'd really like, hey, if you're listening to my subscribe. But
Yeah.
I'm
It's
I'm it can be hard, but yeah.
Yeah, it's hard to because there's always a cycle. Like in musicians, we sometimes run into that cycle because you could be like, a 70-year-old musician in your first band and you have the big hit
Hmm.
and you're known for that, right? And then you try to engage on other things, and then everybody keeps on going back to your big hit. And then you could
Yeah.
end up spending like 20 years with like your biggest hit was when you were 17 and
Yeah.
you're 28 or you're 44, and you keep on having to go back to that because that's the way the industry is. It's like
Yeah.
sometimes you're not able to have 4 or 5 hits. You may have one major, and then that keeps you out there, and you have
Hmm.
to kind of learn how to deal with it, and you find ways to still do new things. But it's like, yeah, sometimes you have like a zenith point where you hit, and then you have to like, well, I still want to be here, so I will take advantage of that and use that to fund my other things.
Hmm.
So
Yeah, for
that
sure.
it's kind of like a hard thing to deal with. But sometimes if you actually come to terms with it and realize that, okay, yeah, you can kind of find a way to kind of find a niche and a
Yeah.
level that you
Yeah.
can be.
So I mean, like I've been trying to kind of plow through and figure out what's next. We have a couple of bigger projects. Like, well, I've been working on this Lion King thing that will hopefully be done like eventually. But for the short term, like we just wrapped, and by just like maybe a month ago, we finished a Treasure Planet reanimation where
Okay,
we I don't know if people don't know what they are. Basically, you take a scene from a movie and then you break the scene up, and then you give like a 5-second shot to an animator, and then another 5-minute or second shot to another animator, and they approach it in their own artistic style, and then you put it all together. So that's been in production for like probably 2 years or so. Like it should have been done much faster, but I had to kind of jump on people to make sure like we're either going or not. You're either like
Was
meet
that
the
because of
deadline.
COVID? Did COVID slow it down, or was this other
No,
thing?
I think I gave I was too hands off as far as like making those harder
Deadline.
decisions as far
Okay.
as is X person communicating? Is X person like telling us what's going on? Or do we just have to move on and replace them, kind of thing? And that's hard when you're doing nonprofit work because you don't want to mess up anyone's day or anything. But like also at the end of the day, you have a responsibility to the people who did submit their stuff on time to finish the project.
You still have to run it like a business, even though you might not, a profitable business. You can you can fire somebody because they're getting paid. I guess if you're dealing with it, you still have to maybe let people go, and it's harder to have those decisions.
Yeah. Like there was an instance where one of someone on the project was having a lot of different delays, and I think she got COVID, and her power went out and stuff like that. And I was like, but she kept on saying, "Oh, we'll be done this day." Oh no, it can't. Oh, we'll be done this day. And I'm like, yo, like we gotta just cut this because it's not. I'm not blaming you for getting COVID or all this stuff, but the thing is, you're not communicating clearly enough.
You
kind
make
of
a
stuff.
decision. Like if you're doing, we run into it in music. Like people commit to a project, and then every time you have rehearsal, they're late or they don't show up or they don't do their part, and he's like, well, we need a new bass player.
Yeah,
that bass part's not coming out the way we wanted it.
Like even when you're doing in school or you're doing nonprofit work, there's still some level of professionalism involved, or else like stuff isn't just gonna get done at the end of the day.
Well,
so
you gotta have your end state product. Like as a musician, like with that band, when we go on stage, everybody's got to play that song on a team. And when you're doing your project, you're putting together that film, video, everybody's got to work as a team. And if people don't do their piece, then it's not going to come out as a whole. So I think any artist can understand when you have to work with other artists, there's got to be that collaboration where it's going to work right, as a unit, or how are you going to actually get to the end goal?
Yeah, things aren't going to get done. So. And I get it too, like as someone who has to deal with a lot of mental health issues, like things happen, but like at the end of the day, like my thing is just like, I don't care what happened, like grandma's sick or something like that, but are you being active and communicating it, or are you waiting till like the due date and saying, oh, my dog has a cold? And I'm just like, why didn't you say something sooner,
Yeah, well, it's just being proactive. I'm a producer, right? So if everybody knows we got a target for a record and you set that target, and then people miss rehearsals and people don't send their stuff and they don't do the revisions or they don't show up for the mass. So it's like, well, how are we going to hit the date if you keep on blowing through the deadlines because you come up with excuses? You do have to have a level of discipline. People think musicians are just partying all the time. We have a level of discipline to be able to get something out, right? And if you can do other things, but you still have to have the discipline to actually get that one thing that you're supposed to do and do it. So it's like you can't keep on blowing it off, or how are you going to get it done? It takes you 1 year to do one song, and like that's not very productive. As a musician, we tend to, in this day and age, we have to do like one song a month in order to engage our audience, or we lose our audience. So it's like it's a totally different world, and we have to be a little bit more disciplined and put out more material. So your stuff takes a lot longer to do. So that's a lot more. So if you're planning it out, you're trying to do multiple projects. It must be hard if you miss deadlines, then you got to go back to something that you thought was done, right?
Yeah, and we run into a lot of issues as far as people overcommitting and not being realistic with their schedules, and that usually comes from like being fans of the channel or just being fans of the thing that they want to do. Like, oh, I like animation, I want to be an animator for this YouTuber kind of thing. Like they let that stuff cloud their head. I'm sure you get, egos and all that stuff too. And when like push comes to shove and we have a deadline or we have a project that needs to get done, like, they're like, oh, whatever, I got, I can't do this. And I'm just like, well, then, why are you here?
Why are you in it? Like yeah, I mean, that's why I've always asked people, because they go, I was 17 when I got into music. I'm 55. I stayed dedicated. I keep on putting albums out. There are guys when I was 17 said they wanted to do it, but as soon as they didn't get a record contract or they didn't get where they wanted to go, or their wife or their girlfriend said, stop doing that stuff, then they dropped out. And it's like, so you have to be kind of, I want to do music because I love it. Like whether it does well or not, doesn't matter. And what happens is sometimes things do well you don't expect, but you got to be dedicated to your craft, because not always that you're going to get the payday because you love it. And if you love it enough, in my opinion, if you love the art you do, you break through. You see actors, that happens to them. They keep on pushing, then they get the breakthrough role.
Yeah.
You get the painter gets in the gallery because they kept on pushing. It's just a matter of whatever art you're in. I think it's a matter of you actually doing the work.
Yeah. And a lot of people, don't really get it if they've never, done that before. But then that kind of blurs the line of like, amateur versus professional. And a lot of times, if you're on that level, you're like, okay, well, I'm ready to be paid. I'm just like, well, we get our stuff done. Does that count for anything? So, and we have a more complicated production process than I think the average YouTuber, because we do more complicated stuff in our in the editing per se, and then like depending on what I'm reviewing or whatever the case. So we'll get like new art assets. So I did a Rick and Morty video recently, and we have our own Rick and Morty versions of the standard avatar of basically a cartoon me that I talk through. And then, so those take longer than just using our standard ones that we have. And then, if there's something new, like I'm thinking about doing like a Scooby-Doo thing. And so, I'm like, oh, okay, why don't we get a Hanna-Barbera set? I don't think we have that yet, kind of stuff. So, and that kind of makes it funner, but it also adds some time on it. So it's kind of a mix.
Well, I like the fact that you're so expansive, because that's kind of like my thing is like, I like to mix genres. And you jump into you went to Hanna-Barbera, you're looking at Lion King. I mean, it seems like I think it's really cool as an artist to, explore a lot of things. As a musician, sometimes we throw stuff at the wall, right? And I always tell people, like, a lot of times artists will have all these tracks and nobody ever hears them. And as a producer, I go to the band, I was like, you know what? The stuff you don't want anybody to hear, that's like the best stuff you got. And it's a lot of times there's so much self-criticism with artists that they miss out. They're so self-critical, they don't put out their best work. Right? I think it's good to try to, like, get other people involved. So do you have like people who actually can look at what you're doing and say, hey, that is good, you probably should do that? Do you have like a trusted group of people that you show
I've been doing this for like, I think I'm at 9 years now or something like that, 8 or 9 years. So I'm, as an artist, I'm usually can trust myself, like looking at, an artist portfolio or an editor portfolio. But I think for feedback things, it's kind of too of like, hey, this person's great at drawing My Little Pony stuff, but if we give them a human, can they draw a human? And like we've already talked about this. So like I think kind of looping back to that, I think the feedback process is really important just too, which I'm sure you're used to, because people have different eyes and they'll look for different things. And we have a feedback process where I think probably like 5 or 6 people are looking at different renders of the video before it's goes up live. So that's important, because everyone gets burnt out from looking at, like, I don't want to look at 10 versions of the same video and just look at like nitpick it, and
then your level of being able to critique gets overwhelmed because you had too much input. So it's kind of good to kind of like, when you're producing, I was like, I've been listening to this mix all day, and I might think it's the best thing in the world, and they got to give it to somebody else. And it's like, oh, and then they actually hear something I'm missing because I'm listening. I'm too stuck in it, and you
Mm-hmm.
gotta get somebody who's not stuck in it to actually go and give a different opinion. So it's very important, I think, to have feedback loops in any art you do, and to kind of be open to, explore and show people like as much as you can. I know some things are personal. People take things personal, but I think when you're doing art, that once you get into a community, it's part of that whole reason probably why you want to go back to California, right? You have those like-minded people, and they help you. It's
Yeah.
like, in art, like an art community, if you have a collective of a bunch of
Mm-hmm.
musicians, you see a lot today. They get these art, and I would think you probably have art collectives too, and we feed off of each other. We can go and say, well, an art collective of musicians, like they go and they take over a club, and I would
Mm-hmm.
think an art collective of artists, they can take over a gallery or take over a venue and run it, right? Because you guys are all, you have a better shot if you come in with 10 different artists
Yeah.
and have a whole, you guys got like a theme, but you're 10 different people, but you're part of this collective. You can have a better engagement with the market than just
Mm-hmm.
one person trying to break through.
Yeah, and I think too, like just in general, artists are a lot less social than musicians. So like it's hard.
Harder to
Sometimes
build
it's
that.
hard for them to go into those environments of just like, look at me, like I was gonna say, look at me, I'm Mr. Meeseeks, but look at my art. It's great where a group of musicians can play and that's loud and that attracts a crowd. But if you're just like the old lady selling their art on the corner, like it's not going to be as impactful to like, hey, what are they doing? So,
Mm-hmm.
you have to kind of have those pitches, not those pitches, but like those environments like conventions where, you can
Yeah,
stand
then it
out.
kind of gives you like the kind of environment like a festival. Like a musicians,
Yeah.
we love the big European festivals or big EDM trance festivals, electronic music festivals. You get like 100 bands, you get 20 bands, 30
Mm-hmm.
bands, and then everybody gets to go rather than this one guy trying to hit it in a club.
Right, right.
If you go to a club in New York and you have 10 bands, you feel more confident than if you were just one guy on stage.
Right, right. And especially too, like, I've never been, but they have VidCon, which is like, like what you're describing, but for YouTubers specifically, and you
Oh, a
can.
convention for YouTubers.
Yeah, so there's a lot of John Green runs it. He does Crash Course and stuff like that. Chill guy, but because I don't know, but from what I gather, anyway. But it's similar where YouTubers bring a lot of different people can be artists, people can be authors, people can be
Yeah.
cosplayers. So you kind of get a range of
Cross.
talent, if you just but you
Yeah,
have that
cross
thing in
genre.
common.
You
Yeah.
can, like the way we're here. I'm a musician talking to an artist,
Mm-hmm.
to a video artist, and we'd be, well, what's in common with that? Well, we as musicians, I create video content for my music videos. So like looking at what somebody who's really, that's your skill set, you can learn from everybody. I think,
Mm-hmm.
and just as a podcaster, I decided I had to branch out to not just talk to musicians, or I'm only going to get my audience so big. So
Mm-hmm.
I started to realize I should talk to influencers and mentors and other types of artists that aren't just musicians, like actors and film directors. And I started opening up a wider space. And I think this whole idea of being more expansive. If you're
Mm-hmm.
going to try to hit the market, and like the way you're talking about throwing things at the wall, as a podcaster, it's the same thing. We have
Mm-hmm.
to, like I said, you could have started, well, I'm only going to talk to rock bands. And
Mm-hmm.
then you open it up, oh, I'm talking to EDM and I'm talking to country music. And then, oh, well, now I'm going to talk to actors and I'm going to talk to models. It's like, you have to kind of figure out like, hey, I should be more entertainment, not just music, but like everything.
Mm-hmm.
So is that the same kind of thought that when you start to decide, well, I'm going to do Lion King, I'm going to do this thing, I'm going to do this.
Yeah. And like the good thing about me specifically is because I study history and I study this stuff on the side like constantly. I'm just absorbing it. Like I don't have to do a lot of research because I just can throw up some of this stuff. Like the Scooby Doo video that I
Mm-hmm.
might do. Like I know a lot about like I can break it down without really having to cite my sources, just because it's just something that I've been inhaling. So, but yeah, it's interesting as like an artist studying art. If that, to your point, but it's nice. It's nice to kind of, explore, those different aspects where if I was just doing original stuff on my own without YouTube, it wouldn't be as fun. Or even if I was just doing original projects, like I can't talk about, or, I don't have a space to like analyze characters or things like that. So YouTube has been really nice as far as a creative outlet for me, because I have these thoughts anyway. I'm really busy right now, but in general, if I go too long without making a video, like my head just spins because I need to like throw up this information that's just I'm thinking about. But yeah, it's fun, and it's nice also to like on the channel we have we make our own animations, so they're every once in a while kind of things, and that's also like, I can dip my hands in whatever, aspect I want, assuming I have people that will work with me to do so.
There was one thing I was wondering about, because I've noticed, like, and I don't know, maybe I'm making the wrong assumption, but it seems like when I was a child of the 70s, like Hanna-Barbera was coming out like new cartoon ideas like every season.
Mm-hmm.
They'd have like a new character. And it seems like the development of new characters seems to have dropped off, and there's a lot of reboots.
Mm-hmm.
Seems to be less new characters being developed. And if they're being developed, they're off to the side in some indie world, and they're not what used to be like a normal Saturday morning TV. You don't see very, new ideas a lot anymore.
Well, I think too, people aren't looking at the original ideas a lot of the time. They're already like, if they're rebooting, like, they just rebooted Proud Family like a year or two ago. I don't know, whenever it came out. People are already invested in that because they've, like all the way from the beginning of development, because they're just like, hey, it's that thing that I like. They're making more. Where if it's an original concept or original show, that thing is not going to get the press all the way from beginning of development to like air date, because people like who are into animation, for instance, if it's a cartoon show, will be interested if like a creator from X thing, like Jendy Tartakovsky and Primal is an example.
He actually did something new,
sorry, go ahead.
No, but I was like very impressed, because I like everything he does. And then I saw, then it's, this is really cool. That would have been cool if it was actually on Cartoon Network, but a wider audience could see it. But it was like, that's that kind of thing. I used to, as a kid, I would see these new characters getting introduced, and I don't see them as much.
Mm-hmm.
That's how it was. I guess it's harder. I mean, he has a big name, so he could do it. But it seems like it doesn't happen as much as it did in the 70s.
Yeah,
maybe people don't support it. Maybe they don't have the funding for it anymore.
Well, for Hanna-Barbera, generally, so that was kind of when the establishment of like, animation being for kids, was first like again established, because Hanna-Barbera does a lot of recycling in their animation. They're not known for having the best quality animation. They're known for just throwing stuff up or just taking. Disney's done it too, but like I think Hanna-Barbera has a bigger, is more guilty of it per se. So like say, you can take a character like Scooby-Doo, and who's also already pretty similar to a character, the Jetsons dog Astro. They're basically the same character, but they're a different color palette. So like you can take your Scooby frames and just recolor them to be Astro, and then you save, you save time. So it's kind of that attitude, and kids didn't mind that as much as adults who noticed it and said like, hey, this is kind of cheap looking, So because Hanna-Barbera overproduced in the 70s, the 60s and 70s, that's kind of where that animation is just for kids kind of came from.
But that's weird, because then you have the whole thing in Japan with the anime, and I'm living there. I got into all this stuff. I got into like Robotech, and I got into Cowboy Bebop and Bleach and all that stuff. But it was just like the fact that you go on a train and the salaryman in the suit and tie is reading Bleach. He's reading Naruto, and it wasn't a problem that they didn't think of it as stuff for kids. And actually, the content in Japan was very adult in these animes,
Mm-hmm.
and the manga was very adult too. And what came over, we got edited versions, like the whole thing with Battle of the Planets versus Gotcha Man. I don't know if you ever got into that, but there was a show called Gotcha Man that got converted to Battle of the Planets. They used to cut out 15 minutes of it for the U.S. version because it was too violent.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
Well, other countries, especially Japan and Europe, are usually because they're already really influenced by art anyway. They've grown to be more accepting. Like even like the Disney stuff, and like I had a friend who went to Europe over Christmas and brought me back some Lion King stuff, and she was like, "Yeah, it's a lot more." Sophisticated product line than compared to America, because they're not just catering just to kids. They don't have to dress up the characters in pretty colors and stuff like that, or oversaturate them to get a kid to buy a toy. It's just like for everyone. So like all my stuff, is just like just black line art with the characters and the logos and stuff like that, where anyone can wear them. And I wish that would change. It's getting better, with the rise of Rick and Morty and like more adult stuff. People are kind of
like Adult
accepting
Swim had
it.
like
Yeah, like
different level of content.
Yep. The Simpsons has been a big outlier, but now the problem is adult animation has to be crude, and which isn't necessarily true.
Crude. Yeah, maybe it's a little too crude.
Yeah, so like what I really liked about the My Little Pony demographic thing is that it was just a sophisticated show as far as like the characters being written well, the plots, for the most part being complex. And that's what attracted the audience to it, because it was just like, constructed really well, and the mythology and the lore was great. And, all those like extra stuff, like Lord of the Rings kind of level.
Yeah, it was kind of like Adventure Time, I think, was really cool in that when I got into Adventure Time, because it was like, it seemed like it was a kid's show, but it was written that an adult could watch it, and it had depth. And it was like, wow, this is kind of like when I was a kid and I was watching Johnny
Bravo.
Not Johnny Bravo. I was actually watching now I can't get into it. But
Johnny Quest.
Johnny Quest, yeah. If you see, the art in that show was like unbelievable. It compared to everything else that was happening. If you looked at the backgrounds that were like the Kirby, Ditko, it was really high level comic art being put into a show, and I was like, why does this thing look so much better than the other cartoons?
Because they had a bigger budget. At the end of the day, fun fact: Kim Possible's her black top was actually inspired by Johnny Quest's black shirt that he wore. Cool. So there you go. There's your history point. But yeah, I think at the end of the day, too, it depends on what each individual audience member wants to engage in and consume. And the more open-minded people are going to be able to consume more fun things. And so that, again, the Pony Group people were open-minded enough to be like, hey, it's a show, that is marketed to children, but, I'm willing to try to watch it and see what all this hubbubaloo was about. And then they became fans. So, like you can't change that overnight. It's something that you have to pick at. But we're getting there. Hopefully we'll get to Japan levels or European levels of just people consuming animation forever. And Pixar obviously is helping with that too. And, sometimes Disney and sometimes DreamWorks, just depends.
I heard like Bone is supposed to be coming, like Jeff Smith's Bone.
Yeah.
And I think that would actually be very good for the industry to see something as well developed. I don't know if you ever read that comic. It's super well developed. It's like very, very tight story, but comic book character, they look cute, but the story is deep. And if people could see a deep story with cute characters like those characters, but it's actually very deep, and adults would enjoy it.
Yeah.
Adults bought that book. It was in independent comic stores. You had to go look for it. So I think if something like that, or Cerebus actually getting out there from Dave Sim, those things I could increase. I think the quality and then make people more engaged. That like something at the level of service is like, if it ever got produced, it would be unbelievable. But
yeah, for sure. But I'm hoping that people are getting slowly more open-minded. But I think at the end of the day, the whole Disney is for kids era just kind of has to die off a little bit.
Well, hopefully, all the manga and all the all the anime channels is showing that there's a lot of kids actually are buying that more, maybe than even the Marvel and DC stuff. And and if people see that there's that kind of engagement, you would think it's like, well, maybe we should get some of that market.
Well, I mean, and that's the big draw of anime, is because they have more sophisticated stories than, because you have the little kid cartoon stuff like Nickelodeon and Disney Channel, and then you get to, again, like Rick and Morty and The Simpsons. So because, anime can kind of cater for the in-between, or even if you want to get more violent and stuff, then it kind of attracts that audience. But old white people, old white guys who are the executive producers at specific companies are afraid to take risk on something that might be bloody or something that might not be the norm. You can look at
Pokemon. So. I mean, Pokemon is an anime that's like a kid anime, but adults play. If you see who plays Pokemon games, they're like 25 to 40, 50 years old. People are at that age, they're not kids. The people buying those Nintendo games are older people, than kids. Kids buy them, but there's a very big YouTuber audience of Pokemon fans that are not just 12 years old. They're like in their mid-20s. So you would think that you could engage that.
Yeah. But the thing with Pokemon specifically is because it's multi-generational, and people it grew up at the people that are playing it now for the most part have a nostalgic attachment to it. So again, we got to get them young, and
keep them
keep them. And my whole thing too is about you don't have to just watch Kim Possible or watch your favorite Disney movie and just put it down and not forget about it. You can bring those elements into your life, and you can also just consume, continue to consume it if it makes you happy, or you can always put it on the background. It doesn't have to be a one and done kind of thing. And
it doesn't have to be something that was just your childhood thing. It actually becomes a part of you. I think like a comic book fan, I was 12 years old when I got into Captain America and X-Men, but I'm still 55. I still like it. And Marvel has been able to engage that what was thought of as a kid thing, and engage it to now adults go to see these Marvel movies, and they're super engaged, and they're not really trying to act like it's some kiddie thing. The stories are kind of deep, that people die, people get killed. It's not just everybody's going to survive. That's not how it is. And so they've actually engaged an adult audience with an idea that was a kid idea initially. But it's not anymore.
So yeah, I've talked a lot about, on my channel about how Disney Plus is a really great positive thing, where because there's not a box office or ratings minimum, they can just they're YouTubers now, so they can just spit out content and have people watch it and not have to worry about making money, because they're already making money off the service. So it Hocus Pocus 2 and the Proud Family and those kind of things that were risky issues or risky projects, to put Hocus Pocus 2 in theaters or put it on the Disney Channel. You don't know how these things will fare, but if you want to just stick it on Disney Plus and just promote it, and just if it sucks, it's not that big of a deal,
Well, it gives another outlet for animation. I've been my daughter, because she's into art, has been really into watching a lot of more independent films showing up on Netflix and Hulu and Disney Plus and all these other channels, that they're finding places to put some ideas that may not have got through. They're finally finding a place on the cable or on the satellite networks to get engagement for ideas that maybe wouldn't get on to Cartoon Network or Nickelodeon,
Yeah. And it's nice that we have streaming available. And I wish I had Disney Plus when I was, a child, and, because we're directly, by what we watch, we're directly voting on, what kind of content Disney
want.
makes, like, or what kind of content, they want PR wise. Like they're making a Tiana show from like The Princess and the Frog, and that's historically not like the hottest movie, but they're doing it like for the PR reasons, and they're doing it because they're not so worried about the ratings or stuff, because it's just another thing to exist that people can watch. So it's interesting to see.
Yeah, I loved about the 70s is they'd let a show have a chance. Being a child of the 70s, I had to see some pretty cool shows that didn't get canceled after like 2 shows. Like 2 episodes and then it's done.
Yeah,
they got to actually see some cool things. And this thing, sometimes they've got to be, just like in the record industry, you would get an act and they could have 3 albums, and then they drop them, maybe even 5 albums, then they drop them. But at least they got to do it, right? And in the world today, sometimes like you don't get the opportunity to kind of try to find that your swing, because I think sometimes it's got to be a hit right off the bat. Well, sometimes things had to grow, in order for people to actually find it. Like Star Trek, it was
I was gonna say like Star Trek's the prime example of that.
Would have never made it past season 1 in today's world.
Yeah, because
the engagement was super low, and it's one of the most, look at a big franchise they got built. So maybe you could learn a lesson, maybe. For people who make those decisions, watch the podcast, maybe think about it.
Well, if anyone works at Disney, like hit me up.
Yeah, well, just say like we need fresh ideas. I think we need people who are gonna come at things with a different point of view, and I think having women who have a really cool aesthetic and an independent mindset, and don't want to just do what was done before, and take something like what you're doing, and you have a different take on it. Like you have a different opinion. That's art. That I don't know. I don't like anybody that denigrates that, because I think people need to look at it, and haters that just want to say something negative to say something negative, that's fine. But I really don't like to listen to that weight of what they're saying, because I don't think it has any weight. But I think we hit our hour mark, and I'm very happy that you came on the show.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. And I think it was really exciting to talk to somebody with a different type of aesthetic, what the type of art you do, and to hear what your story. And I think everybody's going to enjoy this, and I'm very happy that you came on the show. I hope you have a great rest of the evening, and you do well with your studies in animation, and you're able to get to where you want to be with the work you want to do.
Here's hoping. Do you need me to plug anything, or are we good? Or are they on the Twitters or whatever?
Well, I'm going to be giving you the links that you push on your like later tonight.
Okay, yeah, I just wasn't sure about that. Okay, well, thanks for having me, and I appreciate it. And have a good rest of the night. Yeah, it's probably nighttime. So.
Thank you. Well, it's nighttime here. It's like 9:00.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you very much. And we'll talk to you again sometime. We'll maybe meet you out there when we're out touring, when we finally get back on the road.
But, okay. Sounds good. If you got any gigs, let me know.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.